The sound wasn't from an electronic alarm or a modern cell phone. What woke Gabriel every day, at exactly 4:30 in the morning, was the wail of the wind hitting a loose zinc tile and the cracking of the damp wood of his house. He opened his eyes in the dark, feeling the cold penetrate through the thin, worn sheets. Beside him, on the small sofa bed in the living room that served as a bedroom for both, his mother, Doña Maria, was still sleeping. Her face, even in rest, carried the deep lines of someone who carried the world on her shoulders. Gabriel stood up in absolute silence. He knew that every minute of sleep for his mother was a treasure, as she spent her nights preparing the sweets he would sell before school. He walked barefoot across the dirt and burnt cement floor to the kitchen. There, on the peeling formica table, were the trays. Brigadeiros and coconut kisses carefully rolled, shining under the dim light of a bulb hanging by an exposed wire. Gabriel looked at his feet. His right shoe, his only pair, had a hole in the sole that seemed to grow every day. He took a piece of cardboard from an empty milk carton, cut it into the shape of his foot, and tucked it inside. It was a temporary solution to a permanent problem. Today will be different, he whispered to himself, though doubt weighed in his chest like lead. If you've ever felt like the world was against you before the sun even rose, click the subscribe button. What this boy is about to face will test the limits of your faith in humanity. Gabriel put on his uniform, a white shirt that time and successive washings with bar soap had turned a sad, yellowish shade. He placed the strap of the candy tray around his neck and left. The street was still deserted, lit only by yellowed streetlights. He began his journey. "Candy here," he shouted, but the voices of the big city were louder than his. Drivers in luxury cars rolled up their windows, hurried pedestrians looked at their watches as if Gabriel's time was worth nothing. He walked for miles. Sweat began to bead on his forehead, mixing with the dust of the road. He needed only 10 reais to guarantee bread and milk for the afternoon, but fate had other plans. The sky, which until then had been only cloudy, decided to collapse. It wasn't a drizzle, it was a punishment. The clouds closed like heavy curtains and the water fell with terrifying violence. Gabriel had no umbrella. He had no raincoat. His first reaction was to protect the tray. He hunched his body over the sweets, hugging the wood as if it were a shield, while the rain soaked his uniform until it clung to his skin. The cardboard inside his shoe began to soften, turning into useless cellulose paste. The dirty, icy water from the street invaded the old leather of the shoe, making every step feel like it weighed 10 pounds. He was far from home and far from school. He was alone in the middle of the storm, a tiny dot of hope being drowned by neglect. Gabriel ran. His lungs burned and the cold air of the rain felt like knives entering his chest. He had to get to school. Education was the only way out, his mother pointed to, the only light at the end of a tunnel that seemed endless. When he saw the iron gate of the municipal school, the bell had already rung long ago. The courtyard was empty, only the sound of rain hitting the asbestos roof echoed through the corridor. He entered, leaving a trail of mud and water wherever he went. His feet made a slap-slap sound that seemed to scream his condition to anyone listening. He reached the classroom door and hesitated. His hand shook so much he could barely hold the doorknob. He took a deep breath and opened the door. The silence that followed was worse than any thunder. 40 pairs of eyes turned toward him. Gabriel was a specter of misery, hair plastered to his forehead, uniform transparent from the water, and the tray of sweets, now a shapeless mass of chocolate and melted sugar, hanging from his chest. As he took the first step toward his desk at the back of the room, disaster struck. The sole of his left shoe, completely rotted by the moisture, detached from the front and hung on only by the heel. With every step, the sole slapped the floor like an open mouth, thwack, thwack, thwack. Someone in the back of the room let out a giggle. Then another. Within seconds, the classroom was a cauldron of mockery. "Look at the beggar's shoe," shouted a boy wearing brand-name sneakers. "He smells like a wet dog," exclaimed a girl, covering her nose with her notebook. Gabriel felt his face burn, a heat that didn't come from the room, but from the shame consuming his soul. He looked at teacher Helena, hoping for a refuge, a look of compassion. But Helena was exhausted from overcrowded classes and low salaries. She didn't see a child in distress, she saw only a problem. "Gabriel, look at the state of this room. You arrive late, bring this filth inside, and still disrupt your classmates' learning with that noise and that unbearable smell," she said, her voice heavy with irritation. "But teacher, the rain," he tried to say, but his voice failed. "No buts, Gabriel. Leave now. Go home, clean yourself up, and only come back when you can present yourself like a real student. You are distracting everyone. Out." The laughter of his classmates increased. Gabriel turned around. The sound of the broken shoe hitting the floor kept pace with the beats of his broken heart. He left the school and sat on the sidewalk under the awning of a closed shop. He looked at the ruined sweets. Everything his mother had worked for, all the money invested, was lost. He put his head between his knees and cried. It wasn't the cry of a child who lost a toy, it was the cry of a small man who felt the weight of injustice. God, he whispered through sobs, I just wanted to be different. I just wanted you to see me. He stayed there for hours, watching people's feet pass him by. Feet in polished shoes, feet in clean sandals, feet that would never know what it's like to feel the ground through a hole patched with cardboard. He thought of his mother, waiting for him with the hope that the sweets had turned into food. How would he go home empty-handed? How would he tell her that school, the place that should have been his safe haven, kicked him out for being poor? The rain began to subside, but the cold inside Gabriel only grew. He stood up, dragging the foot with the broken shoe, and began the long walk back to the void of his reality. Little did he know that the worst day of his life was about to become the preface to a miracle no one could predict. Gabriel walked back home with the sole of his shoe rhythmically slapping the asphalt, a sound that echoed like a sentence of failure. The rain had stopped, but the cold coming from within was much worse. He looked into the puddles and saw his reflection, a boy the world seemed to have forgotten. Reaching the front of his small house, a construction of exposed bricks and asbestos tiles, he hesitated. He knew his mother would be there, waiting for a miracle he couldn't deliver. When he opened the door, the smell wasn't of food, but of mold and cheap disinfectant. Doña Maria was sitting at the table, her hands hiding her face. When she heard her son's footsteps, she tried to smile, but her eyes were red. Mom. The sweets. The rain. Gabriel began, but the words died in his throat when he saw the pantry open. It was empty. Totally empty. Not a grain of rice, not a scrap of beans. If you've ever felt the squeeze in your heart of not knowing what you'll eat tomorrow, leave an amen in the comments and keep watching, because this boy's turnaround will leave you breathless. Doña Maria stood up and hugged her son so hard he could feel the tremor in her body. My love, the boss at the snack bar. She said business was slow and she wasn't going to pay me for the day today. She said if I complained, there were 10 people wanting my place. Gabriel felt a helpless rage bubble in his chest. How could someone be so cruel to those who needed it most? They drank a glass of water to trick their stomachs and lay down. That night, Gabriel didn't pray for toys or new shoes. He looked at the ceiling and whispered, God, I can't stand seeing my mother cry anymore. If you exist, please show me a sign. The silence of the night was the only answer, but fate was already moving the pieces on the board of life. The next morning, Gabriel woke up with fierce determination. He took the last ingredients that remained, hidden in the back of the cupboard, and helped his mother make one last batch of sweets. He wouldn't go back to school that day, he would go back to the war of survival. He washed his face, fixed his shoe with a piece of wire so the sole wouldn't fall off, and set out for the city center, where people with money circulated. The city center was a chaos of honking horns and hurried people. Gabriel positioned himself near a glass building where men in suits constantly entered and exited. He shouted his merchandise with what was left of his strength, but he was invisible. To those people, he was just part of the urban landscape, an inconvenient detail of poverty they preferred to ignore. It was then that a long, shiny black car pulled up right in front of him. From inside stepped an elegant, white-haired gentleman wearing a gray overcoat. It was Mr. Alberto, a man who built an empire from nothing but who, over time, felt something missing in his luxury-filled life. As he got out of the car and checked his watch, Mr. Alberto pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, and along with it, his leather wallet, stuffed with 100 bills and credit cards, fell silently onto the entrance mat of the building. He didn't notice. Gabriel saw everything. The boy's heart raced. That wallet contained more money than he and his mother would see in an entire year. With that money, he could buy new shoes, fill the pantry, pay the overdue rent, and even buy the medicine his mother needed for her back. The devil whispered in his ear that it was a gift from heaven, that no one would see, that the man was rich and wouldn't miss it. But then, Doña Maria's voice echoed in his mind, "What isn't ours, my son, rots our soul." Gabriel didn't hesitate more than a second. He dropped his tray of sweets on the ground and ran. "Sir! Sir, wait," he shouted, weaving through people. Mr. Alberto was already crossing the revolving door when he felt a small, dirty hand touch his coat. He turned around with an expression of irritation, ready to scold the pickpocket approaching him. "What do you want, boy?" "I don't have any change," Alberto said in a harsh voice. But Gabriel, breathless and with eyes shining with honesty, held out his hand. "You dropped it. Your wallet." Alberto looked at the boy's small hand and then at his own waist. He took the wallet, opened it, and saw that nothing was missing. He looked at Gabriel, noticing for the first time the worn uniform, the shoe tied with wire, and the tremor of hunger in the boy's hands. You ran after me to return this? Do you know how much money is in here?" the businessman asked, his voice now soft and filled with shock. Gabriel just nodded. "Why didn't you keep it? You clearly need it more than I do." What Gabriel answered next would change not just his afternoon, but the course of his entire existence. "I may be poor, sir, but I'm not a thief. My mother says the only thing a man takes from this life is his honor." Alberto felt a lump in his throat. He, who dealt with sharks in the financial market every day, had just received an ethics lesson from a hungry child. "What is your name, young man?" he asked, putting the wallet away and placing a hand on Gabriel's shoulder. "I am Gabriel, sir." Alberto smiled, a smile he hadn't given in years. "Well then, Gabriel. I think your days of selling candy in the rain ended today. Come with me, let's talk." Mr. Alberto's office was a world Gabriel had only seen in movies. Glass walls showing the whole city, leather armchairs that felt like clouds, and a silence that commanded respect. The businessman ordered a full meal to be brought for the boy. Gabriel ate with a mixture of desperation and politeness, trying not to show that this was his first real meal in days. Alberto watched him in silence, processing the story the boy told between bites, the humiliation at school, the broken shoe, the empty pantry, and his mother's unshakable strength. If you believe God uses the right people at the most difficult times, leave an "I believe" in the comments. "Gabriel," Alberto said, leaning forward, "many men in my position would have given you only 50 Hyish and sent you away. But I saw something in your eyes that I don't see in my directors, pure integrity. I lost a son many years ago and I always wondered what would make the world better. Today I understood that the world only improves when we invest in people like you." That same afternoon, Mr. Alberto's driver took Gabriel back to the slum, but this time the car didn't just stop to drop him off. The trunk was packed with food baskets, new clothes, and most importantly, a box of genuine leather shoes, sturdy and shiny. When Doña Maria saw her son getting out of that luxury car accompanied by an imposing man, her first instinct was fear. But seeing Gabriel's smile, a smile she hadn't seen in years, she fell to her knees. Alberto explained his proposal. He wasn't giving charity. He was offering a job as a service supervisor at his foundation for Maria, with a decent salary and benefits, and for Gabriel, an immediate transfer to the best private school in the city, all expenses paid. "Your only obligation, Gabriel, is to continue being the man who returned that wallet," Alberto said before leaving. 10 years passed like a breath. Time, which was once Gabriel's enemy, became his greatest ally. He was no longer the invisible boy with the candy tray. He had graduated in business and law with the top grades in his class. But he never forgot the sound of his old shoe slapping the floor of that classroom. On a Monday morning, Gabriel decided to visit his old municipal school. He was impeccable in a custom suit, driving his own car. As he walked through the hallways, memories hit him like waves. He stopped in front of the door of the same room he had been expelled from. Inside, teacher Helena was still there, looking older, more bitter, and visibly tired. She was yelling at a student over a torn notebook. Gabriel knocked on the door. "May I come in, teacher?" he asked. Helena looked at the successful man and didn't recognize him immediately. "Yes, sir? How can I help you?" she said, changing her tone to the sycophantic one she used with authorities. "I just came to say thank you. Years ago, you kicked me out of this room because my shoes were broken and I smelled bad from the rain. That day, I thought my world had ended. But that pain gave me the strength to never again accept less than I deserved." The silence in the room was deafening. Helena's face paled as she realized who the man was. Gabriel didn't say it with hatred, but with the peace of someone who had won the war. Before leaving, he handed an envelope to the school principal. It was a personal donation to renovate the entire building and buy new uniforms and shoes for every student in that institution. "No child should be expelled for being poor," he declared before everyone. "If you've made it this far, it's because you know that life is a cycle of sowing and reaping." Gabriel sowed honesty in the midst of hunger and reaped a destiny of greatness. Never let today's circumstances define who you will be tomorrow. The rain may soak you now, but it's what makes your garden bloom in the future. Share this story with someone who needs a miracle today and show them that honor is still the most valuable currency in the world. What did you think of Gabriel's attitude in returning to the school? Would you have the same nobility? Write your opinion in the comments. Remember, your character is your destiny.